Alright, so I am Allie Murphy. I'm doing my presentation on Limon. And we are just gonna jump right in for time's sake. So, Ada Limon is the current poet laureate. We're gonna discuss that here in a second. And we're gonna talk first about her appreciation of visual and performance art from a young age. She went to drama school and at the University of Washington, and that actually was very influential on her voice as a poet. I have this little quip from an article, but Ada Limon is a professional poet. She manages this career in part by embracing poetry as a form that is meant not to be just quietly read, but performed aloud. So I will be reading the poetries out loud today. So if you need a second to read the text, feel free to pause, but we're just gonna keep on keeping on and kind of just spend more time on the poems themselves. So if you need some time, please feel free to pause. Alright, let's talk about being a poet laureate. It is a title that dates back to the 14th century England in the chivalric courts. But the Poet Laureate of the United States is supposed to raise national awareness of poetry. I was really motivated by this to choose Ada Limon as my poet, to see what she writes about social issues and, modern things. This is the poet that represents our country right now. So I think I did a good job reflecting her work in this presentation. So I hope you agree. And let's keep on. I'm doing this backwards. We're first going to talk about nature. It is such a common theme of Ada Limon's. Ada Limon's love of nature. 3 themes are super prevalent in the work that we are going to discuss today. We have nature, life and death, and self-reckoning, which I guess in a way those are all the same if you think about it. But this first piece, Salvage, was written for Greenpeace. It is featured in her book that she published this year, The Hurting Kind. And we are going to go ahead and jump right in and read it. Salvage. On the top of the Mount Pisgah, on the western slope of the Mayacamas, there's a madrone tree that's half burned from the fires, half alive from nature's need to propagate. One side of her is black ash, and at her root is what looks like a cavity that was hollowed out by flame. On the other side, silvery green, broadleaf shoots ascend towards the winter light, and her bark is a cross between a bay horse and a chestnut horse, red and velvety like the animal's neck she resembles. I have been staring at the tree for a long time now. I am reminded of the righteousness I had before the scorch of time. I miss who I was. I miss who we all were before we were this, half alive to the brightening sky, half dead already. I place my hand on the unscarred bark that is cool and unsullied, and because I cannot apologize to the tree, to my own self I say I am sorry. I am sorry I have been so reckless with your life. Okay, so we see themes here. In these opening lines, we see nature and life and death. We also see this element of duality, and I bring this up because it is so common in her work. If not duality, there's a dichotomy, which we are going to discuss the difference here in a second. But I feel like this two-natured thing that comes up a lot in Limon's work is symbolic of life and death. There's also the self-reckoning element here in Salvage. I think this self-reckoning, I bring it up because it is such a huge part of her voice. Her capacity to share her opinions so earnestly about societal issues. She doesn't force any bias on the reader. I believe this neutrality is what makes her so popular, and it is a consistent element of her voice and her work. So it is something to look for as we move forward. So dichotomy occurs when two unlike things are represented in contrast of each other, the point at which they are different. What makes two things different? Duality occurs when two things are inherently indifferent yet intrinsically intertwined, the yin and yang of one thing. And I bring this up now because both elements are at work in this next poem that we are going to read, The Year of the Goldfinches. The Year of the Goldfinches. There were two that hung and hovered by the mud puddle and the musk thistle, flitting from one splintered fence post to another, bathing in the rainwater's glint, like it was a mirror to some other universe, where things were more acceptable, easier than the place I lived. I'd watch them, the bright peacocking male, the low wat female, on each morning walk, days spent digging for some sort of elusive answer to the question my curving figure made. Later, I learned that they were a symbol of resurrection. Of course they were. My two yellow-winged fins twisting on thorns and liking it. Alright. So, twos, we see this dichotomous pair, these two different things, this muddy liquid and this pointed, sharp earth, thistles so pointy, but here are these birds feasting on this in this harsh environment. The universe and the place I live, this is a duality, and maybe a little bit of a dichotomy, I'm not really sure, but we live in the universe is not just where we live. They are, a square is not a rectangle kind of comparison. And then the male and the female, the peacocking male and the low-watt female, the duality here, they're obviously different, but intrinsically connected, as we all know. And I just love this line here, so that is why I included that again. And I feel like this line actually is a good transition into the next theme of her work we're going to discuss, the life and death element. And, the Year of the Goldfinches is about learning to feast on the thorns that life puts on our path, to grow from the pain. And Limon has done that. She has chosen to pursue her writing career full-time after the death of her beloved stepmother, Cynthia. And, the self-reckoning, she consistently bears her soul on the page. And we're going to see that in this next poem, Forsythia. So it is quite a beautiful poem, written in the memory of her stepmom. Forsythia. At the cabin in Snug Hollow near McSwain Branch Creek, just spring. All the animals are out, and my beloved and I are lying in bed in a soft silence. We are talking about how we carry so many people with us wherever we go, how even simple living, these unearned moments, are a tribute to the dead. We are both expecting to hear an owl as the night deepens. All afternoon from the porch we watched an eastern towhee furiously build her nest in the wild forsythia, with its yellow spilling out into the horizon. I told him that the way I remember the name Forsythia is that when my stepmother, Cynthia, was dying that last week, she said lucidly but mysteriously, "More yellow." And I thought, yes, more yellow, and nodded because I'd agreed. Of course, more yellow. And so now in my head, when I see that yellow tangle, I say, Forsythia, 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 more yellow. It is night now, and the owl never comes, only more of night and what repeats in the. So, like I was saying, anytime you want to pause and digest, feel free. I actually want to talk about this poem a little bit more. It was one of the first poems I read, and I love the free prose structure of it. She is very creative in her approach to poetry, but I wanted to feature this because it was her stepmom's death that encouraged her writing, and it was actually the death of my own mother figure, my grandmother, who I'm named after, that encouraged me to start writing. So that is why I wanted to include this piece. And then here, like I said, is links to The Herding Kind, which is also just an amazing piece on life and death and everything in between. I mean, pretty vague description I just gave, but it is fantastic. So as poet laureate, and I think as artists in general, we have a responsibility to begin discussions. So This next poem we're going to look at is a new national anthem written in 2016. So this is before she was titled Poet Laureate. This is representative of her commitment to utilize her artistic voice, beginning conversations on a large and accessible platform like BuzzFeed. She is raising awareness on these platforms of social issues and raising awareness of poetry. So let's jump right into that. So I wasn't actually going to read this one, but I do recommend if you need to pause and read it. It is fantastic. I have also, at the end of this, attached a link to all of her work. But it is a long one, but it is just really earnest, really beautiful. I highly recommend giving it a thorough read. But I do want to talk why I chose this poem. This poem is so just highlights her style very well. She uses free verse prose often. Though a lot of her poems don't conform to conventional poetic forms. I don't see a lot of like villanelles or, tercets or anything like that. But she utilizes a lot of other poetic conventions, lots of imagery, lots of emotion and illusion, and so many themes, as we've noticed, and more. I mean, everything a good poem should have. So form or no form, it is just fantastic. And this poem is just really representative of her voice. So she writes passionately, yet softly comments on the harsh realities of the world, never forcing her perspectives or beliefs. So I think that too also makes it easier to reach larger audiences. And I think that speaks to how well she's handling the responsibility of having such a broad audience. So I am going to do my best to read you guys a poem I wrote inspired by Ada Limon. Bird Song. Autumn has entered its second stage, when the stems of little leaves, each their own universe, each their own fleeting thing, transform into the spectacles of color and light, dancing in the breeze, burning brightly before they fall, clinging on in the face of the inevitable, in brilliant displays of yellow, orange, and red, a bittersweet goodbye to their winged friends, those who took shelter in their shadow casts, whose departure shakes them until they can hold on no longer, until the cold breeze can only carry them away, until they are crushed into the ground. Only the bird song, echoing in the crevices of barren things, springs forth their color and light once more. Well, so this wraps up my Ada Limon PowerPoint Prezi presentation. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I recommend checking out her works. She has a lot of amazing stuff. You can find her at her website. She has a link to all of her poetry. Lots of links to her readings of those poetry. She has a much better voice than I do. I mean, maybe not. That feels bad to say, but she does. She has a beautiful voice, and it's her words, and to hear these beautiful words in her voice is just really moving. So, this is also the article that I quoted. It is really fantastic and charming look into our Poet Laureate's life. So I hope you guys have a great week, and thanks for watching.